Aloha Aina Kahaunaele. My name is Chad Takatsugi, and as one of the producers, artists, and hakumele of the award-winning album Kuha'o Mauna, it is my privilege to be your host for this episode of Mele Huliāmahi, broadcasting from beautiful Mo'ili'ili. Mahalo to Kawaii Collective for inviting us into this space that in many ways resounds with the values we celebrate in this presentation. Mele Huliāmahi features live performances of mele and the contemporary stories of Aloha Aina and Huliāmahi from which they are inspired. Brought to you through the production partnership of Kana'aukana, Kahuli Leole'a, this episode features a few mele from Kuha'o Mauna, an album of 18 new compositions composed and recorded in the few short weeks that followed an unforgettable moment in history. Decades of mismanagement of Mauna Kea came to a head. Tensions were high with fear of a militarized response on those Aloha Aina who dedicated themselves to the protection of Mauna Kea from unwanted development and desecration. Nearby, Pu'uhuluhulu became a pu'uhonua for those who came from all corners of the world, a space of safety and nourishment for the community Kia'i Mauna. Yet in the threat of violence, Kia'i found resolve and victory in Aloha. As an incredible understanding of empathy and connection, Aloha became the connecting force, not only for Kia'i, but for those on both sides of the conflict. Memories of the emotional events on Mauna Kea are now recorded in mele, allowing us to revisit and re-experience this deep-seated aloha. These mele hold the embers of Aloha Aina, holding them ready to ignite individuals and communities into action, into advocacy, into aloha. Mahalo for spending time with us as we enjoy live performances of these mele and talk with the hakumele, the composers of these songs, in order to gain a deeper understanding of what these mele capture and thus how they become useful for an Aloha Aina future. Joining me now to introduce perhaps the most well-known of these mele is community leader and hakumele Kumu Hinale Moana Wang. Aloha e Kumu.
Aloha.
Mahalo for joining us today, and mahalo for participating in this project that has really kind of set off in motion a lot of other movements and some really great conversations about Aloha Aina, about the role of mele in our community, and where we can go next. Kuha'o e Ku'u Hawaii. It's become really famous around the world. It's got over 1 million views on social media, and I know that you have often talked about the origins of that mele. What I wanted to specifically ask about is the night of the recording of that song as well as the music video. I know that we had some of the most accomplished, writers and singers and performers in that room, and it has had a profound effect as much as it has on the entire world. But in that room, there was a special night that I think many of us won't forget. Can you tell us a little bit about that night?
I was overwhelmed to be in the presence of some, not all, but some of Hawaii's greatest voices, their leo, their hakumele. And I could only think to myself, how did I get to be so lucky to stand with all of them? And it was something that I would have never ever imagined, because when I composed Kuha'o, it was a mele that I could give to my kids, to my children, my students at Lokahi Public Charter School. It was a mele to be homework and to speak about the issues and to speak about the predicament of our Hawaiian community. And it was a mele to represent us whenever we went someplace. It ended up becoming a signature. But on that night, I realized that it was born into this world to serve a greater purpose. And for me, that purpose was fulfilled because it was uplifting our people. It was uplifting the name of Hawaii, our Aina, our islands. And it was helping to sustain the hearts, the minds, and the spirit of the people who sang it. So, as one hakumele who stood in the room, I was humbled beyond belief to participate on that night.
You know, I think we've reflected on this before, that when you have a room filled with the talent, filled with the experience, filled with the passion that we all have for our art, sometimes you bring with that a little bit of ego. And sometimes you bring a little bit of, a little bit of that extra stuff that maybe isn't quite as productive. But I think we all recall that night that everybody walked in and checked everything they needed to leave outside. They checked it at the door. And it was amazing to see some of the most accomplished performers stand next to members of a young generation, 2 generations below even, yes, that were able to stand side by side and say the exact same thing. And your mele was the vessel for them to do that. So we look at Kuha'o, Hawaii, the music video, and we acknowledge over 1 million views worldwide and climbing. And we understand that this is a platform that we may have never had before, and it may be a long time before we have again, where we can say exactly what we want to say to everybody in the entire world. If you want to make sure, you as the hakumele want to make sure that people take away exactly what is intended from that mele, what would you say to them?
My thoughts and my sentiment for anyone who will walk away with that mele, that they always remember the sentiment in which it was born. Mele Kuha'o e Ku'u Hawaii may end up taking on many, many different persona. You could sing it at someone's funeral. You could sing it to unite people standing at a party. But it was born with the intent that my students could walk down the road on one of the many demonstrations, protests, and showings up of our Kanaka community that we could bring. It was meant because it has the drive of a march. That's the original sentiment that it was born in. And if and when that they should invoke that part of the mele, I want them to keep that if they're going to sing it out in the public for a purpose like that. We all have many different personalities, and it's up to us to determine what part of that personality that we show at any given moment. There are times for things to be really kanipila and nice and smiley, and there are times where you really have to put so much heart and soul behind it that it could lift and elevate the spirits of everybody to sustain the lahui. That's what they have to remember. And the words, there was a time where I was asked to be present overseas, not here in the mainland of Hawaii. People should know that the hakumele, for this hakumele and that mele, its mainland is Hawaii and no other. If they cannot see that, and if they will not see it, I wouldn't want them to sing my mele. I wouldn't. Because they missed the point of the mele. The piko of the Kanaka is here in Hawaii. The mainland of the Kanaka is here. You must acknowledge that. Ika olelo no keola, ika olelo no kamake. In our word there is life, in our word there is death. Our mainland is here. This is where our people are born. This is where we have a home to come to. And this is our first allegiance. You can travel far and wide as a Kanaka. But for this hakumele and this Kanaka, there will only be one mainland. So when you sing that, remember where your mainland as a Kanaka is. And number 2, if you're going to sing one verse or 2, That can be okay. But it's not okay to, perhaps, for example, on Kamehameha Day, it's not okay to sing every other verse except the main verse that honors his words. I encountered that once. So sometimes our people have to huikala, have to excuse because they don't always pick up on those little things. But anybody who sings my mele, I want you to know the words. If you're going to sing it just because it's popular, auliplikia. If you're going to sing it just because you think it sounds nice, mahalo. But if you're going to sing it because you know the words and you're going to make it a point to at least try to understand what the mele means and sing it like you know what it means, then that is something that I truly appreciate. And it's no offense to anybody. Not everybody can speak our language. But it doesn't mean that you can't try to understand what the song means. So that's what I hope for people who sing my mele and take something away from it.
It's very powerful. And I think, on behalf of myself and others around me, I want to just say thank you for all of the contributions that you've made, both to your community and our entire Lahui, and really for reminding us about how powerful a tool mele with a purpose can be. Mele is all around us, but mele with a purpose takes us to a different place. And so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to thank you again for joining us. And I'd like to set us up because what we're going to do now is we're going to watch the award-winning music video by the award-winning haku mele of Kuha'o e Ku'u Hawaii.
Kai ko'o ka moana kai lana nei Hawaii nau e wehe a halulu ka honua a haumea na kulukulu e ka lani ki e kaumai luna au e ke aloha ole a ka malihini.
Anuhea vale o kopu alikoa o Keawe.
Me ko kamalala valula me ka kuhi hewa. Alu mai pu alu mai me ko mano kalani po. Ka I mai ana me na kama ka hele lani.
Kuha'o.
Ava he vivo ole a hoku pa'a a o he hope ho I mai ai ana I vale no ka kou ka uko e mau I ke ala au e ke aloha ole a ka malihini e le mau ka ko e na I lei vehi a ali I vehi nani o ku Aina. Hoea mau no ka pono sivila a hoi a mai ke ku'oko'a.
Kuha'o. Mama
Kuha'o Mama kakaua
All of the mele being performed today have a common singular thread which strings a lei fashioned for our lahui, and that common thread is Aloha Aina. The term Aloha Aina refers to the relationship between Kanaka and Aina, the environmental system of existence of which Kanaka have played an integral role for centuries. Yet history takes credit for the term, which seems to find prominence in times of distress. These times of distress are just a few of many expressions of Aloha Aina that are part of a longer immemorial continuum. In this way, Aloha Aina always remains both as a reaction of defense and as a pro-action of solidarity. Here to join us today and help us unwrap this concept of Aloha Aina that is so concentrated in purpose, but so broad in spirit, is award-winning hakumele Kainani Kahaunaele. Aloha e Kainani.
Aloha no.
Oh, pehea mai ni kaua.
Mai kaino hau'oli no. Mahalo.
Oh, so happy to hear that things are going well for you. And before we move on, I just want to say congratulations on your brand new project. It's one of those things that's constantly playing in my car. My entire family gets into it. Thank you so much for continuing to share your wonderful stories with us.
Mahalo. Mahalo nui loa.
So we move to this project now, Kuha'o Mauna Kea. And your mele, Aloha Aina Oia'i'o. It's something that captures the essence of Aloha Aina. And as the hakumele, we would love for you, if you would indulge us, to kind of share just your own personal thoughts and understanding about something that's so massive in scope, but at the same time, very intimately and intimate and personal. Especially as you capture it in your mele, Aloha Aina Oia'i'o.
Mahalo nui. Aloha Aina Oia'i'o in itself, in the word itself, in the idea itself, is something that kind of helps to ho'okele, or to help us know how to behave, what is important. And as a teacher of Olelo Hawaii, as a singer, as a hakumele, those are some ways, just some ways, that I have chosen to contribute to our Aina, to our community, to our lahui, because it's something I enjoy, something that can reach the masses. And so through Mele, I think that's one of the ways that can be helpful. It can go into the schools, through education, through celebration with ohana parties, with cultural events such as hula events. So Mele and Olelo Hawaii, to me, is like the magic recipe, which is one way that we can demonstrate Aloha Aina. Mm-hmm.
I think something that's very relevant for us today, right? We're seeing a lot of political, social, cultural conflict happening everywhere. And it really is important for us to be able to really declare what it is, how we make our decisions, and where we root our values in. And something like Aloha Aina is definitely one of those things. So thank you for capturing that, in your mele and in general, when we speak to our lahui. Tell us a little bit about the specific term, Aloha Aina Oia'i'o. It's not necessarily a term that you hear very much nowadays, but from what I understand, there is a history behind it.
Well, Oia'i'o is the truth, And we may have our own perception or interpretation of the truth. But it truly remains, to me, it remains being committed to the work for the Lahui. You know, being in Aloha Aina, that's kind of like being a patriot. But what is a patriot? What does that, what is it? And to me, that's being engaged, being involved, researching the issues, being a part of the issues, knowing how to follow leadership, knowing how to do your own within your own ohana. And so you don't necessarily, you know, not everybody has a chance to be in farming, in fishing, but we all have opportunity to become involved in all our issues that affect our Aina and our culture. And so, you know, there's not really one particular meaning, but it's how you're going to apply and have faith in the land. You're going to have faith in the decisions that our kupuna made. We're going to have faith, and we're going to do something about it instead of just watch things unfold. We can be part of the solution, and even if we make mistakes along the way, we can always get better, because there's so much work that we have to do as Aloha Aina, and so much work that we can affect, you know, with bringing our kids along, bringing our kupuna along, getting our ohana involved. And, you know, it's exhilarating work, meaningful. And again, Mele is one of those ways that I know how to contribute. Mm-hmm.
Oya, no, the truth will set us free. Thank you so much for reminding everybody that, you know, the truth, we all have our own truths, but when it does propel us all forward, right? When we know how to make decisions on behalf of ourselves, our ohana, and our people, that is what is going to drive us to success.
Right.
So mahalo to you, Kainani, and congratulations again on all of your success. Looking forward to many, many more years and many, many more Mele. Thank you for your contribution to Kuha'o Mauna Kea. And so at this point, what we'd like to do is we'd like to feature a live performance sung by the Haku Mele herself, Kainani Kahaunaele. This is Aloha Aina Oia I'o.
Mom.
That last mele, performed by Keawe and composed by Hakumele Zachary Lum, was honored at the 2020 Nahoku Hano Awards for Best Hakumele of the Year. Aloha, Zach.
Aloha.
Thank you for joining us today.
Mahalo.
Nā Pu'uwai Haukila captures a very specific moment within this Mauna movement where you've explained before you were inspired by the 8 kia'i who chained themselves to the cattle guard in protection of Mauna Kea. Now, that moment was very profound for a lot of people, whether you were on the Mauna or off. And we all had to witness what utter protection and strength and resolve looked like. And so, as that moment continues to play in people's minds, I want to ask you a little bit about what you were thinking at that time. And specifically, what's very interesting to me is that you have this song, this mele, that has such a sweet melody and is so calming, but it's juxtaposed really with the potentially violent conflict of a story that's happening at that time. How do you reconcile that?
That's a really cool question because I think that my answer that I'm about to give you was not intentional when I wrote it. But I think what was so inspiring for me watching it from off the Mauna, from where we live in Ahui Manu, was the fact that despite this massive imposition on Aina, on people, on things that really just, in many ways, still blow our mind today. Despite all of that, the response called kapua aloha, right? Rooted in that kapua aloha mentality, was not to fight fire with fire. It wasn't even fight fire with water, maybe. It was, I don't even know. The metaphor loses its meaning at some point, because at the end of the day, you see the kia'i meeting the law enforcement with love. And aloha is not just love, right? Aloha is like, I get you. Like, I have so much empathy for your position, right? And to make that a strategy for the response in protection of Aina, there's something to be said about how much tension can build up in a situation like that, yet how something like a sweet melody can untie all of that and release that and allow that to be an expression that's not only profound, but unforgettable. And like I said, the way that I conceptualize that in this moment, that's not what I intended. But I think the more that I get to continue to share this mele, the more it changes my memories, the way that I feel, the way that I felt, and how that kind of moves us into trajectories into the future too.
You know, whether intentional or not, I think it's pretty amazing that we're able to reflect on a specific moment where we, for ourselves, our people, were really able to define what aloha means. You know, it's like you mentioned, aloha just doesn't mean compassion and love. It's a much more complex and nuanced, and something that is very intrinsically unique to our people. And so thank you for capturing kapua aloha, a very big part of this entire movement.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I want to say thank you again for today, for the mele. Congratulations on winning the award.
Mahalo.
4 years in a row. We look forward to many, many more beautiful mele, telling many, many more beautiful stories. Thank you. Aloha.
Thanks, Chad. Mahalo.
The next mele was composed by Hakumele Anuhea Punua, who has been a leader in recognizing the value and role of mele within a community through her infectious social media campaign, Kainani Kahaunaele, where mele practitioners look to social media to share their performances and thoughts in various contexts, strengthening our collective understanding of the value of mele to our people. Aloha, Anuhea.
Aloha.
Thank you for joining us today.
Mahalo for having me.
Kainani Kahaunaele. I've participated myself several times. I got the hashtag
You so
saved in my
did.
memory. And I'm really interested to kind of unwrap that a little bit. Kainani Kahaunaele is really a way of engaging our whole community through mele. And it really has kind of inspired this following from not only mele practitioners, from just people in our community, both here in Hawaii and abroad. Translating that kind of format and that embracing of mele, what was your recollection of the outpouring of mele immediately after the conflict of Mauna Kea? And if you can help us understand, what kind of role can mele play in bringing together a community?
You know, Mele is our documentation. Yeah, we pala, or we document what happens in time and place, and it truly is our journal, and how we can solidify a time and a place and a space, the emotions and the feelings of what is unfolding. You know, today, because of social media, we see everything unfold right before our eyes at that time on our devices, right? And for me, it really is our opportunity to make sure that those moments are never forgotten. And that's how we as hakumele, or we as musicians, we as kanaka, can always look back to these mele and figure out, like, what were they thinking of that time? And that's what I love about Mele Hawaii, is that it captures those times.
I completely agree, and it's an opportunity for us to be able to follow in the steps of our kupuna, to be able to represent our stories through our words, through our own eyes. And yes, I mean, that was one of the amazing things that happened on the Mauna, is that because of the documentation, because of the technology, we all got to see firsthand. We no longer had to interpret somebody else's words about what was going on. What do you hope, I mean, with someone who has his eye on Kainani Kahaunaele, What do you hope to see out of Mele from our community moving forward then?
I grew up, as many of us have, like, kanikapila was all the time. You know, there was always somebody, grandma was playing ukulele, and I noticed nowadays that it doesn't happen as freely and as open as before. We hire musicians for parties rather than it being your uncle or your aunties. It's not the kids just going up and singing. And for me, I hope to resurrect that kind of idea of everybody can sing, everybody can be part of the kanikapila. And what that really did spur of a kanikapila kākou was that everybody has a song that they know. And if they don't know it, they've probably heard it before. And to inspire our people, especially now, everybody's home. Well, you know, being home and stuck with your ohana, stuck with your ohana gives you an opportunity to reflect upon songs that we grew up with. And my hope is that people start to do that again.
Absolutely. Ola kako ike Mele, right?
Oya no, oya.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us. At this point, I think we're going to try and get our instruments together. We're going to kani some of those pila, and we're now going to share by the voice of the Hakumele herself, Anuhea Punua. This is Leana Mauna Kea i Ko'ohu.
Leana mauna kea I ka ohu, ohu ohu I ka ui o na pua, na pua ho o heno ka aina, honi mai ke alo ke aloha, honi mai ke alo ke aloha, Leana mauna kea ohu I ka ui o na pua, na pua ho heno ka aina, honi mai ke alo ke aloha, honi mai ke alo ke aloha. Noe mai na pua, e luana I ka leo kupaa, mehelei aali I ke anu, hiva hiva I ka leila na kila, hiva hiva I ka leila na kila. Pae mai ana ka leo ho'okahi, e kulike I ke alo o ka Mauna, e a mai ana na mamu o haloa, malama I ke kapu aloha, malama I ke kapu aloha, pae mai ana ka leo ho'okahi, e kulike I ke alo o ka Mauna, e a mai ana na mamu o haloa, malama I ke kapu aloha, malama I ke kapu aloha. Noe mai na pua, e luana I ka leo kupaa, mehelei aali I ke anu, hiva hiva I ka leila na kila, hiva hiva I ka leila na kila.
Oia e Mauna kea I ka aloha, Mauna kea I ke ai vai vanoanu, ka uka hiko ke kapahau, o
That was Lokahi no Mauna Kea coming from the Kuha'o Mauna Kea project featuring Kainani Lopez. And I am honored to be joined by my kumu, the hakumele of that song. This is Dr. Keawe Lopez, Director and Associate Professor at Kauai Center for Hawaiian Language at the University of Hawaii and Manoa, and hakumele of that song. Aloha kumu.
Aloha nui.
Mahalo for joining us today, and mahalo for all of the work that you and your family have done as Mele practitioners, as Olelo practitioners, as Hula practitioners, as people who just understand and promote the practices of our people as a means for us to get closer to maybe the trajectory that our people should be headed in. Of the many mele that are shared on Kuha'o Mauna Kea, they take us to a very specific place on the Mauna. There are a few that occur off the Mauna, and your mele in particular, the first line says, "A waikiki aku nei ke aloha Aina." That brings forward many multiple layers of intrigue. The imagery of Waikiki next to Ke Aloha Aina. And I'm wondering if you can share just a little bit of Mana'oan context as to what inspired your particular mele.
Okay. O mamua ke la, o mamake voi hapa ya kuku leo mahalo, ya o luo Zach e kaleo. A me kanaio kana na limahana na kanaka I awamo piha I kia kuleana ka ko'o I kia papahana kukia I Mauna. No Mauna Kea. Me ia mana'o wawe e pahola aku nei ku'u leo me ho'omeikai I kia papahana e mauana. Mauana no ki ia mua aku a me na hana wana e hiki mai ana. A e like me kawi o lero ai ma mua loa. Piri no I na mele I haku ia na mele I haku ia I ka wao ka Hulia o puni no ki aloha Aina. A e mauana no e kupina I mau mai ana a hiki kia wa pela no kia mo mele no kia mua aku no leira mahalo. Ia o luo Zachary me kanaio kana na limahana na kanaka I awa mo piha I kia kole ana mahalo nui. Yes, so Waikiki, when everything started up with Mauna Kea, there was a huge, I think for our family, but I think across of Hawaii, you know, of our people wanting to be there to actually support. And for some reason or another, there are some of us that couldn't make it right away. You know, we had to plan our trip to get there. And so in the meantime, we got the call from Hina in July of 2019 to do a march at Waikiki. And so our family went. We closed down the halau that day, and our halau came as well. And we went as a halau and as a ohana. And so when we're invited for this project, yeah, I did choose to situate this mele in Waikiki because that was our kako'o, our first kako'o to the Mauna. Of course, Ke Aloha Aina and kako'o of our people's olelo, our olelo and our Aina has always been, you know, something that we've shouldered, we've braved carried and awamo throughout this whole time. But specifically, we wanted to make sure that we pen the documentation of us being here at Waikiki on Oahu for Mauna Kea. And so that actual first line comes from a Mele hula that we were taught from Uncle Kimo for Queen Emma called a Mauna Kea Okalani. And so we started the Mele that way, a Waikiki. And instead of Okalani, us, the Ke Aloha Aina.
I think, if you look through the different verses of the Mele, there's some imagery there that that does in a very poetic, very sophisticated way, kind of juxtapose imagery of the past with what was happening exactly on that day. Why don't you walk us through a little bit of what was happening?
So we started there at Mauka of Kalia, and then that's where the march started with Hina, and then we walked with Hina. We got to Helumua, and Helumua is known for the uluniu over there, right? Ikava o ka noho ali'i ana, yeah. But when you look back at Helumua, all you could see was all the Hawaiian flags, and so the waving of the palm trees in the traditional context, what Helumua is known for, actually was this a rise of bravery from our people with our flags, velo. The word I used there was o'ili pulelo, nahaya Hawaii. So instead of looking back and seeing the uluniu and the holuoka, lauoka niu, we saw the veloing of our flag. And then right from there, you could see just this whole sea of red and yellow. And those are called the vaiali'i, or what we call the vaiho'olu'u o nali'i, right? Our red and our yellow. And so that's the next verse. And then we come to Aina, after Helumua, we continue on to Aina, and where Kaiulani made her home, and that was known for the pikake, the peacocks that used to strut over there. And then it took me back to a song that we often sing for kipukai, and that word kakai haheo, na manu pikake, a song of Pukui and her visit with Jack Waterhouse in Kipukai. And so the kakai there wasn't necessarily the peacocks, but actually our people, the koa make'elahui, moving forward and trying our best here from Oahu to actually be there for Mauna Kea. And then we end up in, right above the Waikiki shell where, we met and we actually did some mele and some hula over there. So
the layering of the mele is so inspirational. I want to ask you, as a kumu olelo, kumu hula, kumu mele at the university, and as a father, what was this experience and this project Kuha'o Mauna Kea? What is the significance within the annals of Hawaiian music and today?
Well, we've been, as mele practitioners today, we often steward over a repertoire that actually comes from our kupuna and their experiences, and their experiences either guide or shed light on our path today, right? Olelo ia maka olelo na ala ia I ma'ai ka hele ia ko ka kupo e kupuna. This particular composition, or these compositions actually were a way where we actually could share a little bit of our experience today to shed light, to provide some, some of our experiences for the next generation to come, so that they know that they can as Keaulu Moku, pen that mele au'a ia, he mele na Keaulu Moku no ka aikanaka, the grandparents of, the grandfather of Kalakaua and Lili'uokalani. We can continue that actual message to continue to retain our heritage and au'a for our, until we have, as long as we have to. And so what was very, awesome was to have that experience, to be, one of those, one of the many, because I saw there was a lot of mele that had come out from this, but one little mana'o of our experience there to actually help and support and give encouragement to the next generation as they continue to brave our colonial past, our colonial present. As I've become accustomed to spending time with you, I see everything, there's a lesson in everything, and just
having your family here as a part of the recording, at the event itself, as a part of the recording process, and now here in the performance and moving forward, I think that sends a message as well, that this declaration of Aloha Aina doesn't sit in any particular generation, and if anything, there are expectations for generations to come to carry it forward. So I just want to say thank you, mahalo. I mean, on a personal level, thank you, but on behalf of everybody who understands the importance of Mele in being able to tell our stories, mahalo for your contributions, and mahalo for your work on Kuha'o Mauna Kea, and just thank you for everything that you do for us.
Mahalo. Mahalo for the opportunity.
Kumuhula and Hakumele, Manu Boyd brings his mele to life, capturing so many important aspects of Mauna Kea, not only of the people who have defined the space as one of solidarity, but of the Aina itself. Aloha kumu.
Aloha kaua e Chad, pehea oi.
Oh, mai ka ino ke ia.
Good.
I'm just going to stray a little bit from the script and say how much I'm fangirling over this moment. You are one of the more seasoned musicians that we have on the Kuha'o Mauna Kea project, and it's such an honor and respect for me to be able to sit here and ask you questions about your mele.
Mahalo, I appreciate that. And although you can't see it, I'm smiling right now.
Yes, smile with your eyes.
Exactly.
Smile with your eyes.
Well, mahalo nui. That's very nice, and thank you for that.
Yeah, so let's talk about Vehile A'ali'i, your composition. In your mele, you have a very ethereal component to your song where you have a lot of mentions and references to Aina and Mo'olelo of our people. And I wanted to ask you, how does hearing and understanding references that you bring into your mele and other hakumele bring into their mele help our movement of Aloha Aina and our people?
I think from the musical perspective, what I kind of drew upon was sort of a Roland Casimiro style. And so that theme that's established in the beginning, it takes us back to Roland's music. And his interest in history, in Pele, in Kamehameha, and his kind of being a little bit out there and very contemporary at that time. So, it reminds me of Waimea, because we used to go there in Halau with Robert and Roland and Ala, and we would go to Brown Sugar Ranch on Mauna Road, and Roland would play his guitar all the time and just sing songs, and we would kanikapila and listen. So I've been associated with Halau Nakamale for 42 years. And so it's just kind of a part of me. And then the elements of the mele, and I as we were talking prior to the interview, I think it's really interesting because A'ali'i is synonymous to me with Mauna Kea, with Waimea, Pu'uhuluhulu, Pohakuloa, that whole area there. And it's also it's a favorite of mine. It's a symbol of Halau Nakamale, and it's a symbol of Halau Oke A'ali'i Kumakani. And so I think in considering the sound and the images I wanted to include, A'ali'i had to be a part of this.
I think I love what you mentioned about kind of going back in time to the days of Roland Casimiro and the idea that, you could make a strong argument that our kahua is being fortified every day, and that the idea of the kukulu now, we're in that space to make sure that we have that forward progress, knowing what our foundation is. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this particular mele, Vehile A'ali'i, and its role with these other mele on this project Kuha'o Mauna Kea?
Around the same time, in fact, when I went up to Mauna Kea, now I only went one time, and at that time it was a stormy weekend, so there weren't a huge amount of people, but I was happy I went. I was able to share. I went to the microphone, we can kanikapila over there, and the kupuna, the residing kupuna that day was Hokulani Hope. And anyway, I had just discovered this, or I've been doing some work on another verse of Pauahi Okalani that we sing at Kamehameha every year in honor of Princess Bernice Pauahi. And Lili noe poli ahu, vai au kahou pokane, na kupua kama aina, one kuahivi. So I had just learned about that one of two other verses we don't sing at all, and I thought, and I sang it for them, and they enjoyed it. A lot of those there in what I call the pu'uhonua in that tent were Kamehameha graduates. So that had to be a part of the song, and so each of the four kupua, and I really call them akua. They're snow goddesses of Mauna Kea and Tualalai and Haleakala, etc. Then the reference in the verse talking about Waiau, so the reference to Waiau is that very sacred lake at the Vekiu or at the summit of Mauna Kea. And I imagined it, in this case over here, sort of rippling, ho ale ale. And why it began to become animated was because all of what was happening below. So ika ho'olapa kapalili olalo. And who is causing that relationship between the Vekiu and the Kumu of the Mauna, which is really not the Kumu, but where we were the people. And people coming in droves and gathering, and referred metaphorically as the Palila. Although that bird name Palila is actually not in the Mele, they're referred to as Manu Aihua o ka Mamane, because the Palila needs to eat the Mamane seed. And that word Hayamu, I learned that word years ago from the Keawe Mele story, to gather or to flock together at Keala Komo, at the entryway, the access road to Mauna Kea. Then I thought, in order to now that all of these elements, the akua, the kanaka are all there, I wanted to bring in kia'i for the mauna, and so particularly hualalai, talking about the glistening of the noi, of the mist, and the animated ahi of Kilauea, which is animated once again. So, and then, and who are they protecting with the people is Kalani Wakea. So in reference to the Sky Father, the Akua Nui, or Kalahui. And then finally in the last verse, I wanted to also bring in the Velo Velo Akahai Hawaii. I have come, when you look at a flag, and we all see flags, and we know flags represent many things, countries, they represent states, they represent many things. But the aloha for the high Hawaii is something that I've learned, working at Kamehameha, doing presentations with Maka'ala Rollins and Laiana Kanoa Wong, and really considering that it is an emotion-evoking flag. It's more than a flag, to me, And then finally, kapu aloha. I think kapu aloha is genius. The idea that we should be respectful and have aloha for one another, and for that to be put in a kapu format is just genius, and it worked. And it could easily have not worked. People were up there ready to fight, ready to, to be violent and all of that. And we've seen similar expressions or examples of that recently elsewhere. But kapu aloha, I think, is something that every Hawaiian, I think, can embrace today. And if we can do that, and that was set by the kupuna, that means I think that we are returning to a nohona that is like the nohona experienced by our kupuna. We have to respect authority, and the kupuna are the ali'i, they are the leaders. And this is an example that we are able to keep it together. And the hua, or the fruit of that behavior, is powerful.
I love this idea that in your mele you capture that we have, with all the conflict that was happening at the Val Kanaka level, if you will, that same agitation and that same discussion was happening in tandem at the Val Akua level. And your mele captures that perfectly. Thank you, Manu, so much for your contribution to this project Kuha'o Mauna Kea, for this mele, and for the years and many, many mele that you have shared with us. And so we're happy now to share this mele, sung by the Haku Mele himself, Manu Boyd. This is Vehilei A'ali'i.
Alo.
Kepa poli ahui ka ho, kohu kapa ahuna ka hou pokane, alana kahi vehilei kahi o, ohu kahi o nau te tuahi. manu ai hua o ka mamane Hai a mua i te awa ko Ena te ahi o mauna loa O lili ko e ka noe o hualarai No ka lani whake ai ka alaneo Ka ui tawe ki o nā moku Tuana e ka mehile i a ali'i Kahi ko kupa o ka lahui No ka velo velo a ka hai Hawaii Ke aloha Aina mauloa Aina hou no ke kapua aloha No mauna ke ala Hei
Ka Aina aloha. Aloha wali a Aina ko ka hua. Au e ka ilili e ko ho hu ia nei. E pai ho ia ka toaku I paa maila ke ka hua hale ho. No ka kou e nā pua e ho luluai. E ala e ka I, ka mahi, ka palena. I mua loa ka leo ka lana kila.
We greet the sunrise as we chant at Tutu's feet. We call upon the mana of our gods. As night gives way to daybreak, tears fall from the eyes. We know now why we came in. Tutu's called us all to rise. Rise, sons of Hawaii, Kuiluna, daughters of this land. Rise in the Kamali, Kuiluna, Pupukai, hand in hand. The hub of Mauna embraces all of you for standing on what is pono and what is true. Kukia I Mauna, our sovereign battle cry. Kupuna on the front line, they are calling us to rise. Rise up, sons of Hawaii, Uiluna, daughters of this land. Rise up in the Kamali, Kuiluna, Pupukai, hand in hand. At Puhuluhulu, Hawaii standing tall. The kapu of aloha, aloha binds us all. Makalaina kiai, as day gives way to night. Kani kapu, sound the call for all to rise. Rise up, sons of Hawaii, Huiluna, daughters of this land. Rise up in the Kamali, Huiluna, Pupukai, hand in hand. Rise up for our Lahui. Rise up for our land. Rise up for each other. Kuiluna, pupukai, kuiluna, kapu aloha, kuiluna, kukia I Mauna. Rise up, rise up, rise up. Rise up.
We cannot end this episode of Mele Huliāmahi for Kuha'o Mauna Kea without getting to talk story with one of our favorites in music, entertainment, and mele practice. Del Beazley joins us as the hakumele of Rise. Aloha, Del. Welcome.
Aloha, Chad. Thanks for having me, man.
It's such an honor to have you here as one of the more veteran performers and entertainers. That's my very diplomatic way of saying that I'm younger than you.
Yes.
And just watching the performance today, though, I mean, I think you showed us all why you've been in this business for so long, why you've attained all of the accolades that you've achieved. But there's something a little bit different. Today you had someone very special in your performance, your mo'opuna.
Yes.
And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about what is happening today, where it makes sense for your mo'opuna to be a part of this performance of this mele, and what does it mean for her and her generation?
Okay. My granddaughter is Ulumahi, and if you listen to that, if you take that name, just that name, it's very uncommon to hear a name, a Hawaiian name, Ulumahi. It's to grow it with great attributes, which she's doing. So, during my time, we didn't have access to what my granddaughter has now, and that's the language, and that's a big thing. So she is a Kulakaiapuni student, and she speaks pretty well. But I think when we took our trip up to the Mauna, that really touched her, and it has changed the lives of both my granddaughters and myself, just being around the movement, and it inspires her to be a leader of her lahui. So she strives to be that, to do what is right, even when nobody looking, to do what is pono. But for me, involving her is just giving her and her generation a voice in a project. This Kuha'o Mauna Kea, to me, how do we say this? It's chronicled time and space, this one period, and it's going to go on to be the benchmark of the movement now. We're going to find out from this album if we're going to progress or if we're going to go back. So this thing sets the songs involved in here, the feeling, the mana, all that inside the na'au that came out. That's the middle right now, right? Hopefully the next album will be maybe Lanakila Mauna Kea, Because for a long time we've been singing how much we love the land, how much we got to fight. Would be nice to one day sing one song that says, the fight, Paul, we won. And I think this is the stepping stone for that, for the next generation. Take the lead.
I think that's really powerful when you talk about how, there's something very intimate about this interaction between you and your granddaughter, but there's something also very broad in scope, right? About the story that you're telling and the expectations of her generation and really the kuleana that they are now going to have to awama. We're at this crossroads, right? And like you said, we could go this way or we could go this way,
right?
And really, it is that younger generation that is going to kind of travel down that path, and kind of determine our destination. So that's really profound and really interesting. You have been writing and performing music for across 4 decades, maybe even longer.
Oh yeah, since
I'll be kind.
Since the state bird was a pterodactyl, I've been doing this thing.
So so what's different then? What's different about all of this?
I think for many years I've always written songs, social commentary about time, space, all the things, current events that mostly affect Hawaiians, or affect the Hawaiian people, their lifestyle, the way they live, where they live, no more place for live. And all these things are the stuff that's fueled a lot of my songs. And some of these songs are like 30 years old. And during that time, really didn't see the light of day as far as, the radio stuff and all that. But everything has a place and time. And it seems like my time is coming around with these songs that I've written. Songs about, Brown Man Blues is just social commentary about what was happening on my side of the island in Wai'anae, There was a battle a long time ago about longline fishermen coming in and getting close to shore and taking all that resources away from all people who survived on it. I mean, I'm a fisherman's son, so, it was close to me. People leaving because they cannot afford, all that stuff. So it's all mentioned in there. And I've written other songs to tell a story of the Waiahole water rights struggle, stuff like that. But more so, I guess I was I know you guys have heard the story of, unbeknownst to me, I was mentored by 2 great Hawaiians. One of them is Kalani Ohelo, whose son is taking care of that Waimanala Hunana Niho. And this other big Hawaiian man named Wendo Kahale O'umi. And they took me around when I was a teen. I didn't really know where I was going, but we would show up at these things like for Mokawea or Sand Island during that struggle. Makua, when they were bombing Makua. Auntie Frenchie was part of mentoring me, on what is important. Skippy Kamaka Vivoole was part of that conversation too, because the camp that we stayed at was right across the firing range of Makua. I mean, I can tell you guys stories, but we're gonna keep those underneath for now. But I guess my role now has changed to passing on, to teaching, and it's funny because now I'm asked to speak on the importance of cultural preservation through Mele. So how do you answer that? I mean, it's very opinionated, right? It's just my mana'o. But to think that the things that I've written and the things that I have spoken of and supported have kind of gained ground or kind of gained momentum for me to speak on this on behalf of those who will come up and lead the charge after us, right? No matter what our function is in the movement, we all get on function. It's just, mine is just music, I guess,
Well, I know we've been kind of joking about it, but in all honesty, I mean, as a recipient of the wisdom and the experience that you've brought to multiple generations, I mean, just mahalo. Thank you so much for reminding us that with Mele, they can never take away our voice.
Oh, yeah.
And they can never stop us from telling our own story.
Of course.
So we want to say mahalo to you, Del.
Thank you so much.
for your contribution to this project Kuha'o Mauna Kea. Rise with your own granddaughter, multiple levels of pilina there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for
thank you
having
for everything that you've done for our Lahui.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Aloha Hawaii. I love you guys. You know that.
Through these performances and conversations with Haku Mele, we quickly remember that Mele is not just entertainment in the form of Hawaiian music. Mele is a cultural practice, like many others that may come to mind, that plays an important role in how we remember events, people, places, and thus how we relate to them. This relationship is Aloha Aina, and though we honor a specific moment in Aloha Aina history, when we come to know Aloha Aina as an honoring of connections and relationships of land and people, the sentiment remains true in everyday life. The past year has challenged us to envision a better future. In Hawaii, that future must be tied to Aloha Aina, as an understanding of empathy for one another and for the Aina that sustains us. We want to thank again Kanaio Kana and Kahuli Leolea for bringing us this special edition of Mele Huliāmahi. We end our program how we began. This final performance is a music video produced by Hawaii Pono'i Coalition and OEV TV. And while it features the same audio recording of Kuha'o, what we see and what we feel are a true testament to how we have changed over the year to follow. It is a hopeful reminder that when called upon, all those who live by Aloha Aina will stand for its values, for our families, for our futures.
Kai ko'o ka moana kai lana nei Hawaii nau e wehe a halulu ka honua a haumea na kulukulu e ka lani ki e kau mai luna au e ke aloha ole a ka malihini.
Anuhea vale o kopu alikoa o Keawe.
Me ko kamalala valula me ka kuhi hewa. Alu mai pu alu mai me ko mano kalani po. Ka I mai ana me na kama ka hele lani.
Kuha'o.
He viva ole a hoku pa'a a o he hope ho'i mai ai. Ana I vale no ka kou kau ko e mau I ke ala au e ke aloha ole a ka malihini.
E le mau ka ko e na I le vehi a ali I vehi nani o ku aina. Hoea mau no ka pono sivila. A hoi a mai ke ku o koa.
Kuha'o.
No kula
lahu i e ha'awi pau. Ai o